I literally hate you guys. So we want to say hey to Kenny. Hello, Kenny.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey! Kenny, motherfucker.
There's some energy.
Kenny, I am going to send you a bottle of bourbon for putting up that nonsense, getting this thing ready.
I guarantee you don't need to do that. I have way too much bourbon. If I could probably give away some to you all, and that's probably what I need to do.
Do you think he could live up to your bourbon expectations? I don't think he could. Whatever he sent you isn't good enough.
Brian's pretty sneaky with his bourbon. Yeah.
Hey, the best bourbon is a free one, so I wouldn't put too many complaints out there.
That is true. Unless it's from Costco. Costco's Kirkland bourbon. I'm a big Kirkland guy, but I don't think Kirkland bourbon is good. What do you think, Kenny? Have you had that?
Well, actually, they just announced it today that they are rebranding and they're coming out with 3 new expressions in partnership with Barton 1792. So you're going to start seeing a small batch, a bottled and bond, and a single barrel, all at different proofs.
Now, let me ask you
I'm already
Kenny.
smarter.
From Kirkland. Wow.
Kenny, do you have a business card that says you're a bourbon guy?
I actually don't have a business card, oddly enough. We give away like stickers. We look at stickers as like our business card.
See,
We figure that's
I got a neighbor who doesn't have anywhere near the credentials you have, but what he does have is a fucking business card. He just likes bourbon, and he likes to share his enthusiasm.
I have that card
with the fucking card. And I wasn't sure if that was a bourbon thing or if that's just a neighbor thing. And apparently, it's a neighbor thing, not a bourbon thing.
Yeah, I was like, do I need to get a card? Like,
right. Apparently, you do. If you want to live in my neighborhood, you absolutely have to get a card. You're
That's
already
the membership. It better be high glossy card too.
Yeah.
It needs to be legit at that point.
So I listened to some of your shows today. Give us the background. How did all this start? Was it buddies? What got you into it?
You know, bourbon itself, I kind of started drinking bourbon, I think, where a lot of people at college, right? I mean, that's kind of where I fell in love with it. And after college, I found myself still drinking bourbon while other friends were kind of gravitating to other things, getting into wine, but I just still kept drinking bourbon. But I was still drinking, mid-tier, lower-tier stuff. I mean, it's post-grad, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're still doing. And then at some point, the bourbon bug hit me around 2013, 2014, and I just started going ham and buying like a bunch of bottles. And there was my podcast partner now at the time, he was in a totally different industry, and he said he was actually going to start a podcast on what he does every day. He does lawn care, spraying for weeds and all that sort of stuff, because he's listening to podcasts day in, day out. And he's like, I'm going to start a podcast on my industry. And I think he realized it was going to have a short runway and the amount of people that were probably going to listen to it. And he had a friend that said, well, you're from Bardstown, Kentucky. Why don't you do a podcast on bourbon? And he's like, all right, that's a pretty good idea. And he reached out to me because our wives were mutual friends at the time. And he knew that I was really getting into it. And I said, well, let me go and do some research, because my friends and myself, I kind of coined myself a little bit of like the dream killer, because I look at it like anything that you think of that you can do, it's probably already been done, and you're not going to be able to do it
negative
better.
like that too. I kill everybody's dreams. It's not
every
bourbon
time.
related, but if somebody starts talking, I'm like, no, that's
Any
a bad
kind of
idea.
Optimism.
Yeah, I'm
half empty.
Shut that shit
chap.
down.
I'll suck the air right out of that fucking room.
It's not.
And he just said, would you be interested in doing this? And I said, well, let me go ahead and I'll kind of see what else is out there. And there was at the time only 2 or 3 other like bourbon podcasts, and some were, a few guys sitting around a microphone sniffing Elmer T. Lee going, oh, I smell vanilla and caramel. And I'm like, okay, I wouldn't even want to listen to that one. And there was another one, which is Whiskey
stick up
Cast.
their ass when they were doing that.
Yeah. But there's another one called Whiskey Cast, and hats off to Mark. He's still doing it today, and it's a very good B2B kind of focused podcast, but he covers whiskey in the category as a whole, and not just bourbon. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, well, there's something here that we can do. And I took a page out of another podcast that my manager at the time was running, a very successful tech podcast called the Cloudcast, and it's interview style. He used to have just startup CEOs on and kind of ask them and share the knowledge of what they're building. And I said, well, this is what we're missing. Like, we're missing a voice from the distilleries. We're missing a voice from getting the information from, behind the lines. How do we have people that they know what a bottle of Maker's Mark is? They know the iconic red wax, but where did that come from? Like, what's the story behind it? And how do we get, Bill Samuels, the chairman who, really took Maker's Mark from nothing and grew it into what it is today. How do we get him on and tell that story? And so being able to kind of capture those stories and being able to bring that on is what we've been doing now. And we started that back in March of 2015. And so we are, just now over 6 years old, 304 or 5 episodes into it now. And we finally have it's like a well-oiled machine. It took us like 100 episodes to finally get our gears in motion. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been a fun ride so far.
This is
and now
fantastic.
back in 2018, it started leading us, and now we actually have our own whiskey brand too.
How do you feel about Kentucky bourbon barbecue sauce?
Oh, barbecue sauce. There you go.
I'm a barbecue sauce
I'm a
guy.
huge
and
barbecue
I got
sauce
a great Kentucky bourbon barbecue sauce. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Is that overlap, or do our fields overlap at all, or is that a whole different thing?
I mean, you can use bourbon in almost anything, so why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Why not? And because it absolutely tastes fantastic on ribs, chicken, anything.
Listen, what about, I'm going to give you an idea here, Kenny. What about a light beer pursuit? We start a podcast around light beers. I'm a huge light beer guy.
Yeah.
Miller Light, Coors Light, Corona Light.
Can I
Just
introduce-
those three.
Amstel Light.
Just those
That's
three.
it.
The
Just
whole
those three.
podcast.
Yeah, that's it. I don't want to go any further.
As a Canadian, I have to
Sounds
throw
like
in
one
light
episode.
blue. Light blue, because Labatt's blue comes with a light blue. Absolutely amazing.
And I would also like to say, speaking of Kirkland's, do not put
No.
their light beer
Do
in it
not do.
because it is terrible.
Really?
Oh, it's
product
terrible.
that's
Kirkland's,
terrible?
yeah,
I don't
that's the
believe it.
only
Whoever they
Kirkland
have
product.
bottling their
bad.
beer or canning their beer for them is not.
Oh,
it's
it's
not
terrible.
good.
I thought that was a great deal.
Wait a minute,
for
Kenny, have you?
I love that we're talking about shit beer right now.
I know. Well, we got this bourbon connoisseur on
That's
there.
my fault. I started with the
Yeah,
barbecue
way off
sauce.
topic.
But what I want to know is, have you heard of?
Walkie's Best Light is pretty good too.
Ooh.
I love
The
the
Beast.
beast.
The Beast.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Does Philadelphia make a good bourbon or no?
Oh, he's probably never.
So
heard
I
of it.
mean, there's distilleries now across the U.S. Just a handful of years ago, there was the majors here in Kentucky that produced 95% of the world's bourbon supply, and over the past I think 10 years now, we now have around 2,000 distilleries across the U.S. Wow. So if I haven't tried every whiskey across every single state. There is a lot of great bourbon being made outside of Kentucky nowadays, and that's kind of what has a lot of us excited in the bourbon world too. Is that there's gonna be a lot of cool shit that's gonna be on the shelves here in a few years.
So
No, wait. What's so special about bourbon, like compared to rum and otherwise? Why is bourbon get so
Well,
much
there's a
attention?
distinction between bourbon and whiskey too, right?
Sure.
Yes.
What is that? Maybe like I guess
Well, that's a good question. It's a separate question, but I'd like to hear the answer.
the starting
Can I
point.
ask another question
No.
too?
Before you can answer.
No.
Yeah. Is there a summer bourbon drink? Because I'm a margarita guy, and I'm a big
tequila
summer.
type.
I need a summer drink.
God
There
damn
is a
it.
good summer drink.
there's
I'm a big fan of the Gold Rush cocktail, so go take that one. It's like bourbon with some honey and some Domaine Canton. It's really good.
Is there any
Domain.
tequila or margarita that I can put in it?
I mean, I guess you could swap out the bourbon for the tequila, but
I like this.
You got to go
I
with
think
raw
it's called
honey.
a margarita.
Raw honey.
Call it margarita.
But yeah,
So hey, Kenny, I do have a legit question around bourbon though, because I'm starting to get into it.
Wait a
Hats
minute.
off that you started it in college, because I
Yeah.
would have spit that up in
Shit, yeah.
college. I'm finally getting a palate for it. Now, bourbon and rye, I'm trying to figure out they're in the same class but different, correct?
So they're both whiskeys, and I think this is one thing. If you ever come to Kentucky and you do a bourbon tour, you're gonna hear the same bullshit 51% story, because they're always like 51. Bourbon has to be made with at least 51% corn.
Yes,
That is what is a bourbon, and they're always gonna say one thing is that every bourbon is a whiskey, but not every whiskey is a bourbon.
So wait a minute. Can you mix bourbon, or are you not serious if you mix bourbon other than with some ice or something?
Well, how do you think I started in college? I wasn't sitting there just
Well, yeah,
drinking
that was
bourbon
Jim
and
Beam
Coke.
straight. I mean,
I was a Ryan Coke and Ryan Ginger guy all through high school and college.
yeah.
So
And don't be wrong. I'm talking about summer drinks. I'll have a bourbon and ginger anytime. I mean, that's always a good
is
thing
a
to have when
ginger
it's
is
sweltering
fantastic.
July heat.
yes, 100%.
All right, I'm going to try that. So speaking of rye, every time somebody brings up rye, I always think of rye bread.
Yeah.
And rye bread is terrible. I'm not a rye bread fan. And
But
here's
rye
the reason-
whiskey is delicious.
Is rye whiskey
some
better
people
than
hate
rye?
it. I mean, I would
Better.
say a lot of people.
Does it taste like
enjoy
rye
it.
bread? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to say, "Pugh."
Well, rye's got more bark, right? Typically.
Oh yeah,
It
I can vouch
it's more
for that.
spice. It's definitely more spice, and definitely to be categorized as a rye whiskey, it has to be at least, what do you think, 51% rye in the side of the grain bill. You have there's a powerhouse of a rye manufacturer in Lawrenceburg, Indiana called MGP, and they make a 95% rye mash bill. So it's 95% rye that goes into it, and about 70 to 80% of the bottles that you see on the shelf today are actually all from MGP. Huh. You'll learn when you start going through here is you start learning to read the back labels. Yeah. And so you like take Bullet Rye, for instance, right? You think Bullet, Kentucky bourbon, Kentucky through and through. You go and read the back label. It says distilled in Indiana.
So what's something good, like a cheap, not cheap, but something that I'm not a big bourbon guy, right? I'm a big getting wasted guy.
Yeah. We can all vouch for that.
Big fan of getting wasted.
So it'll get you there. No, not a problem.
Didn't make it tonight.
Yeah. I was at Cinco de Mayo.
Little Cinco de Mayo for him.
Yeah, there was a
No
lot.
bourbon today.
Yeah, no, there was no
bourbon.
bourbon. A lot of tequila and a lot of sweet salt. Is it sweet salt? Salty salt?
We'll go with it.
Salt.
But anyway,
I've never heard a lot of sweet
Does
salt.
does Don take you as like a sugar on the rim kind of guy or salt kind of rim?
Salt.
I think it's a mix of sugar
I
and
don't think.
salt.
I don't think he knows. I don't think he knows.
Sugar in the front and salt in the back.
You could do either one, and he
he's a
wouldn't
rim
notice.
guy.
the
Kenny, are you
difference.
asking about his loafers? Is that what we're asking here?
I'm going to tell you this. Here's the real answer to that: is whatever comes in front of me, I'm drinking.
Yes.
That's
No,
the way
that's
I like
true.
to do
Yeah,
things.
that's a good
We've
point.
seen
But
that.
here's the thing, seriously, Kenny, what am I drinking during the summer? Give me a good bourbon to go and get. I need to go out to the liquor
He
store.
just did ginger and
Yeah.
bourbon.
Yeah, but Kenny, wouldn't
He
you say a
said
Woodford
I-
Reserve would be
Right.
good for him,
What
something like
kind-
that?
Yeah, what kind of bourbon should I be getting? That's not going to break the bank, but I'm going to be able to binge drink. I'm a huge binge drinker, Kenny. Love
I don't
Also
think
known
he's
as
telling you it's spot
alcoholic.
on.
Functioning.
Piece
Well,
of
being who I am, I'm
together
never going to condone binge drinking, but I'm not going to say it doesn't happen from time to time. There's a few staple brands out there, and I think for anybody that's kind of starting to this journey, there's a way to kind of look at it is you got to figure out what kind of whiskey you like, whether it's a low rye bourbon, a high rye bourbon, or a wheated bourbon. Those are the main bourbon categories. So when you think of like Maker's Mark, that's a wheated category, or Old Weller 107 or the Weller Antique brand, all that's in the wheated category.
My favorite, by the way.
Then you go on the low rye side, then you're looking at things like Old Forester, Woodford Reserve, and stuff like that. Go to the high rye side, you've got some stuff from like Four Roses. So you can start picking and looking at some of the major distilleries that are out there and trying to figure out like, oh, is Elijah Craig my jam? Maybe Elijah Craig's your jam because it's $30,
That's good.
94 proof,
Yeah.
easy sipping. You're not going to sit there and hurt yourself on a Kentucky Hug or anything like that.
I recently just got a bottle of Eagle Trace.
Eagle Rare from Buffalo.
Eagle Rare.
Trace.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Eagle
Eagle
Rare from Buffalo Trace. Can't tell much of a difference from Buffalo Trace, except for the $15
that's-
difference in the price.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends. It always depends. And here's the thing is that bourbons will never be consistent no matter what you do because every single barrel of bourbon is always going to be different because the way that it was distilled, the way that it is aged in the warehouse, did light hit it, did a bird shit on it, did anything like can change the flavor of the whiskey inside the barrel over the time. What was the weather like during the years that it was sitting idle? What type of wood, the type of grain, the age of the, how long did the staves or the air
Tar, all
dried
that too.
when they actually made the barrel. So every barrel of bourbon is going to have subtle nuances. And so there's people that get paid at these distilleries to taste bourbon every single day and try to create something that is a constant and consistent profile for all these different brands.
You know what we should be asking about? And I'm sorry about this. In December of 2018, I think Pursuit Spirits was founded.
That is true. That's when we founded our own brand. Yes.
Tell us about this one. So what category are we falling in with yours, Kenny? I have not had this one, and I want to try it now. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we'll take 7 cases.
Yeah, where do I get this?
It's in the mail.
Don's
It's in the mail.
thirsty.
It's in the mail. No, seriously, tell us about
love
how you
alcohol.
got in. Obviously, you got into it because you like it, but how are things going with that?
Things are actually going great right now. I've been struggling all day trying to get registered in different states because we're starting to expand distribution a little bit. But we started back in 2018, and it almost never happened. And I'll give you kind of an idea. We had ended up talking about a brand on the podcast because it was this place called Doc 52's. It's this liquor store in Memphis, Tennessee that was creating their own brand at their liquor store. And we talked about it and saying, well, this isn't something new. Grocery chains used to have their own liquor store brands way back in the day before that sort of tailed off. And I got this phone call like a week later, and this guy goes, hey, I heard you talking about this brand. Would you be interested in doing your own? And we were like, talk to us more. Long story short, he's a barrel broker based out of Memphis, Tennessee, and we can get all behind the scenes of like the whiskey world and how all that works. But he's like, I got 2,000 to 5,000 barrels of inventory. You can come and pick and choose whatever barrels of whiskey you want, and we'll bottle them and we'll sell them under your own label.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, he is. It's a raw deal, and this is kind of like the inside scoop of how what we call NDPs or non-distilling producers, such as ourselves, like how you create brands. This is also brands that, like the largest one you've probably heard of is like Jefferson's as a non-distilling producer. They finally have their own distillery now, but for the longest time, it's people that source whiskey, they buy it on the open market, bottle it themselves, and then resell it. And the way that it typically works is that say you wanted to start the Fiddly Dicking Bourbon Company or whatever it is,
we're
right?
doing that tomorrow, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think Don wants tequila. Fiddly Dicking
Domain is
tequila.
We already got the domain.
And our bourbon's just
In
going
my
to be
head,
Miller
it's
Lite.
already done.
Yeah.
It's Bourbon Light.
Miller Lite, and
It's
it's
a beast.
Bourbon mixed with Miller
margarita.
Lite, a little bit of tequila, a little bit of
It's not
rum.
tequila, it's just margaritas.
Bourbon Light.
That's it.
But the way it would usually work is, you guys got to come together. You got to pull out, 50 or 100 grand or whatever it is. And, these barrels cost anywhere between $2,000 to $10,000 a piece. And you get the barrels, they show up, and you have no idea what they taste like. You don't know what their fill levels are. You could have 100 bottles a barrel or 200 bottles in one barrel, or you could have 20 bottles in a barrel. You're still paying X amount of dollars for that barrel. So it's a super risky type of venture to get into, but he gave us really great terms, and we were the only ones in the industry to actually go and hand pick all the barrels that we wanted for our bottles. So we started down that path, and we sold close to 20 something single barrels until he said, guys, this is a pain in the ass, because when you're doing single barrels, it's cool, like you get to select a single barrel bourbon, but it is a pain in the ass when it comes to creating labels. There's a lot of waste that goes into it. The time that's spent bottling and changing out the lines.
Ink, right?
There's a what now?
A lot of ink.
Well, I mean, there's
Creating
just
labels. No.
I mean, you pay for the labels, you pay for the manufacturer, but there's but put it this way.
Everything's laser.
The minimum quantity you have to order is 250 labels, and if you're only getting 125 bottles out of that barrel, you just wasted 50% of the labels. You just got to toss them. So there's a lot of waste that kind of goes into it. Now, that's what he said. You got to figure out something new. And so we started down the path of about a year of exploration and trying to find different whiskeys and different partners. And we started blending, and we finally came out with a new product back in January this year when we first launched, and it's called Pursuit United. So we launched Pursuit United and in 4 different states plus online, and did about 2,200 bottles of it and sold out in about 2 months. We're
Nice.
now we're trying to right now we're doing our second run of it, and we've got all the barrels in our bottling warehouse right now. So hopefully by the end of next month, we'll be back out there in the market.
So, quick question: when the barrels are empty, do you take them up to a grassy hill and you get in them and you do the old barrel roll down? I'm a huge barrel roll fan.
You got to go over
God,
over
whiskey
Niagara
barrel.
Falls.
Yeah,
That's
the
got to
old
be the
whiskey
best.
barrel.
That's got to be the best barrel to roll down on.
So much fun.
I'm going to take a guess what he does with those barrels.
It's we
Send
actually
it to
don't
the winery. You send it to a winery for the winery bourbon.
There's different ways that we could go with it, but right now we don't do anything with them. We just let our bottler take them, and he chucks them to somebody else or sells them on the open market. So we've done a few barrel aged beer projects with some local distilleries. So we've taken some barrels there and done that, because we talked about beer earlier. I'm actually a huge barrel aged stout fan.
Yeah,
like
me too.
you find me some barrel aged stouts that are 14% or higher, like that's my jam.
All right, listen. Hey, Kenny, we got this is awesome, and it's been a lot of knowledge. We gotta bounce in a minute here, but we'd love for you to plug every and anything you want to plug so we can share it with the world.
For sure. Thank you again, guys, for having me on. So you can always catch Bourbon Pursuit. We release 2 podcasts every single week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, wherever you get your podcasts. And then you can also check out Pursuit Spirits, pursuitspirits.com. And we're going to start opening up in Colorado, Illinois, and
Yes.
potentially Ohio next year.
Yes.
So
We're coming to Benny's.
Illinois, that's where we're at.
We're coming to
What you're
Benny's.
cooking.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta get at Benny's.
Love it.
We're there all the
we
time.
just got registered with the state of. I've got my mytaxillinois.com login and
Sorry
everything
about
now.
that.
So
Love
Hey,
Kate's
prepare to get
relationship with My
fleeced.
Tax Illinois.
yeah, we're legit now. So yeah, we're gonna get there.
That whole Bourbon Trail,
Sounds very
that whole
peaceful.
spot down there is a great. You guys gotta check it
There's a
out.
Bourbon Trail.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, man.
Then I have to
my
walk.
God.
Is this a
Lot of
walking trail? Because I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing it.
It's kind of like the
not a
Oregon
big
Trail.
walk.
Take a
Oh
second.
my
Oregon
God.
Trail.
I was hoping we
Then
were
the
going
Oregon
to
Trail.
the Oregon Trail.
And I didn't want to say. I didn't want to say anything
I
about
had
the
to
Oregon
say it.
I
Trail.
thought for sure you were going to go there.
Yeah, but you know what? I
can't.
knew that it wasn't time for Oregon Trail.
I
It
always
was
thought you liked a
Bourbon
good trail.
Yeah.
I wish,
Regardless of
I
what the
wish
trail
Not a
is.
big
knew it
trail
wasn't
guy.
time.
All right.
Not a big trail. Trail mix.
Well-
Huge trail mix guy.
Well, Kenny, we kept you on long enough. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We need
We need a
you said,
lot more
we just
time.
scratched the
bring you back.
surface. We can't wait to have you back.
We
and
need to
we'll
get
chat
you on
more
for
bourbon.
2 days. Let's do a 2-day
We'll,
podcast.
Marathon.
Just a marathon.
I think-
yeah.
days.
A lock-in.
Oh boy.
We're doing a lock-in.
48 hours with Kenny.
Mushrooms,
Kenny for the
bourbon,
legend.
and Kenny.
Yeah.
I think
sure.
we'll
you
do
go.
a tasting.
As long as you
now.
ship me the
We'll
mushrooms
bring-
too, I'm
Show them
in.
the light.
Yeah.
Some fine bourbon.
I love it. Kenny, you fucking rock, dude.
Yeah, brother.
Thanks,
Thank
buddy.
you, sir.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Kenny.
for
Have a
calling
good
in.
night.
Yeah.
Have a great night, Kenny.
It was awesome. Appreciate it.